Welcome to the Miscarriage Hope Desk Podcast, where we help women struggling with recurrent pregnancy loss by sharing stories of hope and interviews with experts in the field of fertility and miscarriage. If you want to download our free lab checklist, go to miscarriagehopedesk.com/labs. Again, you will go to miscarriagehopedesk.com/LABS to download your free checklist. If you want to connect with others going through recurrent miscarriage, please check out our show notes for a link to our Facebook group. Now I'm going to hand it over to your host, Laura Bowder, for today's episode.
Welcome back to the Miscarriage Hope Desk Podcast. Today we have Melissa Groves Azzaro with us. She is an integrative registered dietitian. She specializes in women's health and specifically in PCOS and fertility issues. So Melissa, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited when Allison had reached out to tell me about this project she was starting, and really excited that it's developed into a podcast already. So I'm excited to chat with you and the audience.
Yeah, so why don't we start out with a little bit about your journey and why you decided to go into the field that you're currently in?
Yeah, so kind of a crazy story. I was working in New York City advertising as a copywriter for 15 years. And I kind of burnt out. You know, it's 90-hour weeks all the time. I was traveling all the time.
Wow, yeah.
I basically what ended up happening with the last straw on the camel's back was I ran the New York City Marathon in 2008, and I had qualified to run the following 2 years. And what ended up happening is I got about halfway, 3/4 of the way through the training, and I just wasn't ready just because of how much I was working, how much I was traveling. I wasn't really properly fueling myself. So when I had to bail on the marathon 2 years in a row, that was the last straw where it was like, okay, this is actually affecting my physical health, my mental health, the things I want to do. Like, how much am I going to sacrifice for this job? So I started going back to school to become a dietitian, and that's how I ended up here. I decided to specialize in women's health and hormones in particular because I had always struggled with hormone issues myself. And when I was working with clients at first, especially women who were coming in for weight loss, from a functional medicine perspective, you're always trying to figure out why, why can't they lose weight? I'm looking at their diets. I'm looking at how much they're exercising. Something's not quite adding up here. And, I would almost always uncover some sort of hormone imbalance. So something like high cortisol or high insulin or low thyroid. And that was where I first came across PCOS and started working in that because I felt like these women were being really underserved by conventional medicine. They were just kind of being told, well, here's the pill to regulate your periods and come back when you're ready to have a baby. We'll give you fertility meds. And there's so much more we can do with nutrition and lifestyle. So that was really what I decided to make the main focus of my practice when I opened my practice. So I see mostly women with PCOS. I do also work with fertility patients with issues other than PCOS, but the vast majority of them are PCOS and, struggling with getting pregnant.
So if you're working with those clients and you're working maybe with women who are struggling to get pregnant or they're experiencing recurrent miscarriages, is there something about nutrition that you would look at and try to work with as far as, maybe what they are eating, what they aren't eating, and thinking about what they can do to make a difference?
Yeah, I think it's really funny. Pretty much every person I talk to, when I'm talking to people who might want to work with me, says that they eat a healthy diet. It's like, I eat pretty healthy. I eat pretty clean is what I hear all the time. Just because you're eating, first of all, healthy is really subjective. What's a healthy
Sure.
diet and what's not is, depends on who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're eating a healthy diet, it may not be the most supportive diet for fertility, for example. So, we want a very nutrient dense diet, lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, way more than you think. You want healthy proteins. So, proteins that your body can use right away, things like, quality eggs and seafood and red meat to incorporate into your diet. You need lots of healthy fats to make enough hormones to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy. So again, that's going to come from things that you may not think of as healthy, like red meat.
Yeah.
Something like a hamburger is super supportive of fertility. It's got lots and lots of nutrients in it. So we look at that. We look at a balanced diet. We want them to be following a blood sugar balancing diet. So they're really not on that blood sugar roller coaster all day. We want them following an anti-inflammatory diet. And what I mean when I talk about an anti-inflammatory diet is not cutting out whole food groups. It's, maybe minimizing exposure to those things that we know are not good for us. Things like deep fried foods, like French fries. I'm not saying never have them. I'm saying minimize exposure to, and really increase those anti-inflammatory foods like, dark leafy greens, dark colored fruits and veggies, the omega-3s from fatty seafood, some, anti-inflammatory herbs and spices like ginger and turmeric can really go a long way. So yeah, from a nutrition perspective, we want everyone eating a nutrient-dense diet, and not just the women, their partners as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Both people involved need to be consuming these nutrient-rich diets. And I think another point that you made that people might not think about is those healthy fats and how important they are. A lot of times I think people equate eating healthy with not eating a lot of fat.
Yeah, and for fertility, we really need all kinds of fat. So it's, obviously those healthy omega-3s from the fatty seafood, but you need saturated fat too for fertility. So have that little bit of grass-fed butter, have, the egg yolks, the steak that's got some fat in there. We need a variety of fats for fertility.
Mm-hmm. What about, in addition to nutrition, are there any lifestyle changes that might make an impact on your fertility? Or if you are a woman who's experiencing maybe a hormone imbalance, or like you mentioned, a thyroid issue or PCOS, like what lifestyle changes maybe should we be thinking about when it comes to that?
Yeah, lifestyle is really important. And, I'm not going to be one of those people who says, like, just relax and it'll happen.
Yeah.
That because we want to punch those people in the throat, basically.
Pretty much, yes.
But, I'm going to say adrenal health does make a difference. If your adrenals are cranking out those stress hormones, there's not a lot of resources left over to make healthy levels of sex hormones. So we want to make sure we're getting enough sleep like it's your job. I mean, the goal here is really 8 hours a night. You want to, actively manage stress. Again, I'm never going to say, lower your stress. It's impossible. We are living in a global pandemic amongst other stressful things right now. So we're never going to get rid of stress. So we have to learn how to manage it without, turning to destructive behaviors or running off to a cabin in the woods and just, giving up, which is tempting, but not going to do it.
Yes.
exercise, you want to get some movement. Exercise is really a sweet spot. You want to get some, but not too much. So it really, unfortunately, as a medical professional, my answer to most questions is it depends. It really depends on you. It depends on what your lifestyle looks like, what your diet looks like, how much sleep you're getting, in order to get a better idea of what type of exercise might be right for you. But I really recommend like listening to your body. If you do a workout and afterwards you feel drained and like you need a nap, it was probably too hard for where you are at this point in your life. On the other hand, if you exercise and you feel really energized afterwards, that's a good sign. Like that's the kind of exercise we want to be incorporating regularly.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, kind of like on the opposite side of the fat issue, where it's like, okay, if I don't eat any fat, that means that I'm eating healthy. And then I think people think the more I exercise, the healthier I am.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, instead of doing 5 intense workouts a week or running 5 days a week, I would really prefer people to cut down to 2 to 3 days of intense exercise and use that newfound free time for something in the stress management realm, like meditation or yoga or, going for a walk in nature, those kind of things that are restorative and rejuvenative, rather than just continuing to push yourself when you're not really feeling it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And there's there's ways to nurture your body and then ways to nurture kind of your mind and your spirit around just like anything you can do in this world, I think, to decrease your stress when possible.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember. I've seen the figure somewhere. I think it's something like it takes something like 90,000 calories to grow a baby from start to finish. So it kind of puts it in perspective. Like now is not the time to be under fueling when you're preparing to carry a healthy pregnancy.
Have you worked with any women who have experienced multiple miscarriages? Is there anything that's specific to that population that might be different from, a woman with PCOS or a thyroid issue? Or are those all kinds of things that might play into it and you would have to look into that further?
Yeah, so, I definitely do some further testing that's within my scope, in order to get some of those answers. Some of the really common ones, and I just feel like it makes me really angry that these things are so fixable. Things like thyroid and low progesterone, those two in particular, if those are the reasons that someone's having multiple miscarriages, it's so preventable. It's like they just really need to have a doctor who's willing to treat them for that, or at least give it a shot. There definitely are those kind of zebra diagnoses that I can't test for, but I can definitely, walk my patients through how to ask for those kind of tests with their doctors. Again, it makes me really mad that, most doctors and just insurance companies and everything make you wait until you've had 3 losses before you get the recurrent loss panel, and rule out some of that stuff. I start to think from a nutrition perspective. I think about things like nutrigenomics. So I'm thinking about genes that affect nutritional status. So MTHFR is one that a lot of people are familiar with. We make sure that they don't have mutations there, or we're supporting them with active folate instead of folic acid. We do, what else do we do? I had a thought and I lost it. So we were talking about nutrigenomics that we test. Yeah, I look at hormone levels as well.
Mm-hmm.
Progesterone's kind of a sneaky one. Like
Yeah.
you could test it 1 week after ovulation and it could be picture perfect, but you may not be sustaining that. That's the other thing I was thinking about was egg quality from a nutrition perspective. If we've
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of losses and you either have confirmed that they were chromosomally abnormal or, you haven't, but they're starting to kind of add up. Or for women who are, have maybe gone down the road of IVF and done some retrievals unsuccessfully, where they haven't really got anything to freeze. That's where we start thinking about egg quality and how to best support that. And, again, it's all those colorful fruits and vegetables. That's where I start to think about supplements like CoQ10, melatonin, maybe to support the egg quality. But again, that's one of those things like conventional doctors will tell you can't affect egg quality with diet. But I mean, I don't know. We have chickens in our backyard, and you see the difference in the egg yolks between the chickens who are running around happy eating grass and bugs versus the chickens that are cooped up and eating grains. So, it's like it's an actual visible difference in the egg quality that you can see based on their diet and lifestyle. So I would have to assume that translates to humans.
Yeah, well, and I think too, you mentioned different supplements. I think that every person's body is different and is going to, maybe absorb nutrients differently. So, are there certain supplements that you would, advise the listeners to look into, or certain things like if this is going on, then maybe look into this or talk about this with a doctor or a dietitian?
Yeah, so you want to start taking a prenatal about 6 months before you start trying. And no, all prenatals are not created equal.
Right.
There are a couple of brands I recommend. I look at things like selenium levels, I look at choline, I look at iodine. I want to see how complete of a prenatal it is. I look at the form of nutrients in a prenatal. So, for example, magnesium, a lot of companies just use magnesium oxide, which is cheap and not very well absorbed. I err on the side of caution in terms of active B vitamins if we don't know someone's genetic status. So I always want to recommend the methylfolate and the methyl B12 so that it's more usable if we don't know their genes. Beyond a prenatal, things like, an omega-3, if you are not eating seafood on a regular basis, which is a lot of people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely an intimidation factor when it comes to cooking seafood at home. Um, Vitamin D, more than, the current recommendations based on more recent research. It's like, okay, if the current recommendations are this and 80% of people are deficient, then maybe the recommendation is not high enough. And we're also spending quite a bit of time indoors right now, so we're not
Sure. Yeah.
getting sunlight. So vitamin D. If you're over 35, that's when or you're having those problems where the eggs aren't sticking or you're not getting viable eggs. That's where I consider something like CoQ10. And beyond that, that's where it's like it really kind of has to get individual.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one that I do not recommend across the board, and I see it kind of tossed around lightly in fertility forums, is DHEA. Um,
Mm.
I see really high doses for that recommended, and that one can actually be dangerous and it can cause symptoms for people who don't need it. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of women, and I've pretty much recommended that one to 3 people. And if the dose that's floating around out there is 75 milligrams a day, I generally start people at 5 and see how they go. It's very strong. I think that's one not to be taken lightly. With PCOS, I consider inositol to be a foundational supplement. That one helps sensitize your cells to insulin more, so that there's some research that it can help regulate ovulation. And I know a lot of fertility docs are using metformin kind of proactively in that population, and there's head-to-head studies of inositol versus metformin, and it, same effectiveness, lack of side effects, none of the side effects. So that's one that I always use in PCOS. If your diet is not perfect, that's where we start to talk about things like maybe a greens powder, some sort of like superfood greens powder, just to supplement those like lower fruit and veggie days, especially, weekends when we're eating pizza and, maybe not eating the salads that we normally eat during the week. But yeah, it gets really, really personalized, really base it off of someone's diet, their lifestyle, and then the lab test results that we get. We see specifically which nutrients they are currently low in, and supplement those.
Yeah, I think that's a really effective way to go about it, is to make it personalized for everybody. And I feel like in general traditional medicine, like it seems to be very one size fits all in a lot of ways. And for women who are experiencing different hormonal issues, or they're having difficulty getting pregnant or staying pregnant, there are so many different factors and so many different reasons why that could be, that it is definitely not a one size fits all problem.
I actually have a nutrition and lifestyle course for women with PCOS. It's not a fertility course. It's just, kind of learning about the root causes and how to treat them. And I've really been stuck for a while, because I'm thinking like, I'd love to get something out there for quote unquote fertility. But like you said, like the causes are so different. It's like, I couldn't possibly do something that would support all of the various causes, including those, zebras, things that are, REs don't even test for.
Right. Yeah, I think it has to be something where, more women, I think, just need to be aware that there are all these different possibilities, and that, they have the power to ask for different tests, or to go to other people besides their, one doctor that they see all the time. There are dietitians out there. There are other, functional medicine doctors or naturopaths. There are a lot of different possibilities and options out there.
Yeah, I mean, I had my closest girlfriend finally ended up having success with a reproductive immunologist. And, there's 3 of them in the country.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's kind of crazy. But, when you're looking at those really outlier things like high natural killer cells and, hidden and endometriosis and things like that, there's not a lot of options out there, but they're not, within reach for many people. But they do exist. Hopefully the information will get out there more and more. More conventional doctors will be, open-minded. I will say it's funny. I moved to New Hampshire when I was finishing my school. So I've been up here about 7.5 years now, and I am on my 4th gynecologist since moving here, because I just can't find one that I like. And I'm about ready to get in the car and drive down to my one in New York, because she was so amazing. But like, my one up here, she didn't even want to see. I was trying to describe a problem that was happening in the luteal phase. And I was like, here, let's take a look at my temperature charts. Like, this is not right. And she didn't even want to see them. And I was like, this is not like woo, out there, like this is, legit cycle tracking data.
Mm-hmm.
She just didn't really see the point of looking at my temperature charts. I was like, really? That's crazy.
Yes, there's definitely a lot of different opinions and different ways to practice. And I mean, you're totally right. Like finding a good fit for you is very, very important. And so something else I was wondering about is when you mentioned that you should be on a prenatal vitamin for about 6 months before you try to conceive. So um, what does that timeline look like as far as like putting all those dietary and nutritional things into place? Like should that be something that you really start getting serious about in the same time frame, like 6 months before you try to conceive?
Yeah, from a physiological perspective, we really have a window or an opportunity to affect egg quality during the time the 3 to 4 months before you ovulate, and it's around that same time point for sperm development.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, the egg you ovulate now, what you were eating 3 months ago is what affects that egg. So, I do think it's kind of funny, like so many women spend, 6 months to a year planning their wedding or, anything really, just lining up all the details. And, I definitely see it a lot in my practice where it's like, oh, we're going to start trying. So I'm going to go off the pill.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they kind of expect it to just happen and are kind of surprised when it doesn't. And I think that that's, really a failure of our educational system, or, I don't know who should be telling us these things. Like, this would have been more valuable information to learn in health class than, the stuff that they had us learn. I don't know. I mean, I definitely, don't feel like I had been educated by my doctor. We spend so much of our adult lives trying not to get pregnant. And then when we shift into that mindset of, oh, we're going to start trying, it doesn't even really occur to us that there might be, difficulties there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned going off the pill, which kind of sparked another question in terms of women's health and hormones. Do you see like women who have been on the pill for a longer period of time, or they've gone off more recently? Are those things that you look at with them too? And do you see any differences with those women?
I really see the gamut. I'm trying to think back. I know I've seen research on it. I believe the conclusion was length of time on the pill does not impact length of time to fertility, but
Mm-hmm.
I would have to check that. No, I really don't. I mean, I see people who've been on the pill for maybe a couple of years, and then I see people who've been on the pill since they were 16. So really doesn't seem to be any real rhyme or reason to it. I do always ask why they went on the pill in the first place.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for contraception, then maybe hormonally things weren't great back then either. Either you
Right.
went on for acne or you went on for heavy periods or irregular cycles. Like, okay, well, this problem has been brewing this whole time then.
Right.
You were just kind of covering it up for however long you were on the pill. If you went on at 16 or 18 for contraception, that's a totally different story,
Mm-hmm.
But if you went on for some sort of medical problem, yeah, I kind of want to know what that was so we can try to address it.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think there is, or there might be some women out there who believe that there is a relationship between like being on the pill and having difficulty being pregnant. It's something that I have, certainly seen floated out there in the world. But I think what you're saying is probably a lot more likely, is that if there is a relationship to that, it's only because of something that was pre-existing before going on the pill.
Yeah, my sister actually both times she was like, "Oh, I'm going to go off the pill. I'm going to start trying." Before she even got her period, she was pregnant, and the first time she was pregnant with identical twins. And then
Oh my goodness.
again, the second time she was like, "Oh, I'm going to go off so that, in about 6 months I'll have a baby." And like, boom, she didn't even get a period again. I was like, "Wow."
Well,
Some
at least she
women.
knows that the pill really works for her, so that's good.
I know, but yeah, no, it does happen.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a perfect thing to consider is just like, why did you go on it in the first place? What was going on? What did things look like? And how that might be contributing to what you're seeing now. I think
Mhm.
that makes sense. So there's like we've said, there's so many different factors, so many things to consider. If someone is listening to this episode and they're like, okay, like, I've picked up some things, I might be able to change around some of my lifestyle things or make some tweaks to my nutrition. But what would be like your biggest piece of advice to a woman who is like, look, like I feel like I'm mostly healthy, I'm trying to do all the right things, and I've experienced multiple losses. What should I do to move forward? What would my next steps be, or what advice do you have?
Yeah, you want to be one of those women who's a pest at your doctor. You want to be that woman that makes your doctor say, "Oh no, it's her again." Like you don't want to just sort of be a good girl and accept what the doctor's telling you. Know that you could find someone else who could tell you something else and finally get you those answers. I've had so many clients who, had bad experiences with doctors, finally found the right doctor that clicked and got them those answers that they need in terms of the recurrent loss. Um, Sometimes it's just a matter of educating yourself on what those tests even might be. I just saw you guys have the lab test
Yes, we
checklist for
do.
download. So I love that. I think that's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've definitely been sort of the last stop on a lot of women's journeys. Either the last stop, this is the last thing we're going to try before we go down that IVF route, or we've failed IVF 3 times. Like, I really don't think this is going to work, but let's try this. And don't forget that it takes two to tango. I think it's I see so many women doing all the things. I mean, we just take so much responsibility for it when in reality, us being the reason is a third of infertility cases. The other third is the man alone, and the other third is both or unknown. Um, so really, it's only a 33.3% chance that it's you. And I see so many women, doing all the things, doing the yoga, taking all the supplements, eating a perfect diet, and then their
Yeah.
husbands are like getting fast food for lunch and drinking beers when they come home, and it's just, really, have to kind of be gentle with yourself. And I think it's a hard place to be in when there may not be answers for why it keeps happening. So always have good support in in terms of having a mental health professional you reach out to. There are mental health professionals who specialize in loss and infertility. So they really, have a better idea of the things you're going through and struggling with. So yeah, it can be really helpful. I recommend that all of my clients work simultaneously with a counselor if they can.
I love that. I think that's all great advice. Where can the listeners connect with you online?
Yeah, so they can find my website at thehormonedietitian.com. And I'm on Instagram at the.hormone.dietitian. I do have a book, a cookbook for PCOS that is available. It's called A Balanced Approach to PCOS, and that is available anywhere books are sold.
Great. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our show notes for details on joining our Facebook group and for following along on Instagram. If you would like a free recurrent pregnancy loss lab checklist, go to miscarriagehopedesk.com/labs. Again, that's miscarriagehopedesk.com/LABS to get your free downloadable checklist. And for even more resources, visit the Miscarriage Hope Desk website, where we have stories of hope plus an entire library of evidence-based research articles related to fertility and miscarriage. If you enjoyed this episode, I would so appreciate it if you rate, reviewed, and subscribed to the Miscarriage Hope Desk podcast. Your ratings and reviews will help others to find us. I want to wrap up by saying that if you are going through a miscarriage, my heart goes out to you, and as difficult as your experience may be, I want you to know that you are not alone and that you will find a path forward.